Let's talk about the Lancair 4P today, the most misunderstood aircraft in general aviation. The 4P has a reputation for being very fast. That's true. The piston version of the 4P is the fastest piston four-seater in general aviation. That aircraft will do 270 knots at altitude, burning 20 gallons an hour. There is no better miles per gallon than a Lancair 4P piston. Now, the turbine versions are amazing as well. This is a Garret powered Lancair 4P turbine, meaning that at altitude I'll burn 32 gallons per hour and I'll be doing 300 knots true airspeed. There's not many aircraft that'll do that. The TBM will do over 300 knots, but it's burning 50 plus. The Meridian will do 275, 285, but it's also burning 50, the PT6s. The Walter version of this will do 275 plus, some of them 300, and they're going to be burning 40, 45. So the speed per gallon is unmatched in the Lancair family. There's nothing that'll do what they do. So what that means is that when people are looking for the fastest airplane, I mean, the whole reason we fly is to get somewhere fast. So without fail, someone's looking for an aircraft or their first aircraft or any aircraft, and they're always looking at what's the cruise speed, what's the fuel burn. So the Lancair is always a very popular choice, and it's not unusual for someone to bring a Lancair to their consultant or broker or mentor and say, hey, I want to buy this. And the answer is always the same. You can't insure it. It's not safe. You're not skilled enough to fly that aircraft yet. You need more time in high performance aircraft. There's a lot of objections to the Lancair. And I just kind of want to address some of those today and talk about myth versus reality and what my experience has been living with my Lancair for 2 years. All right, so the objections on the Lancair 4P are typically the three big ones: is safety, build quality, and insuring the airplane. I'll talk about safety first. I reviewed all the accident reports for the 4P. Its safety record isn't great. It's got a high percentage loss rate. It's got a high percentage fatality rate. All that makes sense. It's a high performance aircraft. If it's made out of carbon fiber, it's very small. It lands at a very high rate of speed. So yeah, that doesn't make it a safe airplane for crashing. This is not an airplane you want to crash. Most of the accidents for the 4P were loss of power and loss of control. And I feel like I can mediate that. Loss of power is about caring for your engine and making sure you have good oil analysis, in my case, good bore scopes, changing your nozzles regularly, all the things that keep a turbine airplane running safely. Loss of control that's within the pilot's control. So this is not a trainer. This is an aircraft built for jet pilots, and its purpose is to go as fast as possible for the least amount of fuel, and it does a great job at that. The consequence or the cost of that speed is the wing is kind of dicey. You have to understand that you don't ever want to get this aircraft near a stall. You fly it faster, you fly it more conservatively, especially in the pattern for takeoff and landing. And once you're up at cruise, it's just another airplane, except for you're going much faster than competitors. So it's a neat airplane. So the safety factor, I can get past that pretty quickly. Build quality. You have to take that on a case-by-case basis. It's an experimental aircraft, and depending on who built it, depends on how good it is. There's a lot of support for Lancairs and Lancair owners and builders. Lobo, they do a really nice job of supporting each other and keeping everyone in the know about who the best builders are and how to get assistance in your build and that kind of thing. Most of the turbines, though, like this one, were built under the owner assist program. So I have a lot more confidence in that because it was built at Lancair when it was still open. It was built at Lancair with guys that did nothing but build Lancairs all day, and the owner would come and assist the build. And that owner assist is really just a loophole for the FAA to allow these airplanes to be built in a factory even though they're not certified. So the owner assist was a really popular option for a lot of buyers. So this aircraft is an owner assist build. I've been through this airplane, every inch of it, and it's a really well-built airplane. So no complaints there. The last big objection for the 4P is going to be insurance, and that's a real problem. Luckily, one of my best friends is an insurance guy and has a lot of contacts, and we worked hard with Lobo and insurance underwriters and creating training programs and all these things to make these airplanes safer. And we have gotten the price of this insurance down to a reasonable number, which is we're currently at $15,000 a year for full coverage. And that's unheard of in the USA for the Lancair. Canada has some better options for insurance, but the United States airplanes, some of these guys are paying $30,000 a year for turbines. That's what I paid the first year. It was 35 grand for insurance for the first year. I chose to insure the airplane because I was working through a lot of systems and making sure that the airplane was safe, and it was my first year having this airplane, so I wanted to be covered just in case something happened that was outside my control, like a mechanical failure of some sort. But I continue to keep insurance now because at $15,000 a year, that's a good deal. I think that's really reasonable. For example, my piston 210, my P210 was $5,000 a year. So it's three times the money for the insurance, but it's also double the whole value or a little more. So I think that's fair. But the Lancair, it's not for everybody. It is a ultra high performance airplane that needs to be piloted by highly proficient, competent pilots that fly often and fly high speed aircraft, and hopefully they're jet pilots or very high performance aircraft oriented people. Many of the 4P owners that I know it's very common for fighter pilots to buy the Lancair 4P. The guy that trains most of us, Chris Rust, is an A-10 pilot. So that's not uncommon to see them come out of fighter jets and want to get into something like this. It doesn't fly like a fighter jet. It's not real sporty. It doesn't have a whole lot of aileron authority. It doesn't have a fast roll rate. It is there's nothing really particularly sporty about it in that regard, but it's fast. So because it has a small wing, we're moving fast, and it's pretty easy to fly. The most difficult part about flying this airplane is managing energy and managing speed. And actually the turbines are a little bit easier than that, than the pistons in my mind, because they slow down really well. When I pull this aircraft to idle, it slows down really well. I get to flap speed easily, I get to gear speed easily. And as soon as I get that last notch of flaps in, I do have to step the power back up. And the turbines, that's kind of the mindset. You get it configured and you immediately have to come back in with power. And that's the only place the turbines will kind of get away from you if you're not paying attention. So you have to be very vigilant about your speed control and that kind of thing. Another thing that's really helped with these aircraft is avionics. When we first built these airplanes in the 90s and 2000s, they had garbage avionics and autopilots. This airplane, when I bought it, had a true track autopilot, and it was more useful as a boat anchor than it was as an autopilot for this high performance of an airplane. So what I did is I put a Garmin G3X setup in this aircraft with the GFC 500 Garmin autopilot. And with that, I fly this aircraft just like a jet. I fly a Sovereign for work, and the protocols I use, or the SOPs, are the same. I take off, I break ground. As soon as I break ground, I pull the gear up, turn on the yaw damper, and retract the flaps when I get to a safe speed and altitude. And as soon as I'm 500 feet, autopilot on, and I don't touch it again until it's time to land. And that's the easiest way to reduce the workload in these airplanes, and these new autopilots are giving us that freedom. Garmin is also coming out with a new replacement for the G3X, hopefully this year. We're hoping to see it at Oshkosh. That's even faster processors and a better autopilot. So we're all excited to see that, because for these airplanes, the better the autopilot, the easier they become to fly and the safer they become. And that's what we're working on with Lobo and the instructor pilots and all that, is just trying to make these aircraft easier and easier to operate for the savvy pilot that wants this level of speed for this amount of money. Because These turbine Lancairs, they can be bought for $450,000 to $750,000 depending on how they're equipped. And there's nothing that'll do 300 knots on 30 to 40 gallons an hour for under $1 million. Like you're looking at TBMs, you're looking at Pilatus, I mean the single engine high performance aircraft. There's not much that'll do that for anywhere near the same money. You're gonna spend double to have the same performance. So it's a neat airplane for that. And I think as we learn more about them and as we learn more from the previous accidents and as we continue to develop the training programs that keep the pilots and the aircraft safe, I think it's only going to get better from here. So I expect in the years to come, these Lancairs will get more and more valuable and more pilots will be safe to fly them. Lobo's done an amazing job of putting, I guess they have 3 or 4 instructor pilots now that travel around the US. And when you own a Lancair, especially if you're insured, if you insure it, you're doing an annual recurrent training, just like I do in the jet. It's not in the simulator, it's in the actual aircraft. But we do this annual training every year where we do engine out procedures. So simulated flame outs with high key, low key, emergency landings. We're doing approaches. We're strategizing the best way to fly this airplane, the safest way to fly this airplane, how to reduce the workload and cockpit management and all that kind of thing. So we're coming a long way with them, and I think that it's going to get better and better and better. So I'm excited to be a part of that journey with the owners of Lancairs, and we're having a blast in the process. I love flying this airplane. There is, I've flown all kinds of cool stuff, and the ability to jump in this airplane in Austin, Texas, and be 2 hours from Destin in Florida is unbelievable. You know, there's nothing that'll do that. I can be in the mountains in 2.5 hours from Central Texas. I can be on the beach in 2 hours. I can be in the West Coast in 4.5. I can be in New York City in 4.5 to 5. I can be anywhere coast to coast in less than 5 hours, which means that I can beat the airlines anywhere. And if I'm flying with 2 people, I've also beat the price of the airlines. And I'm talking coach, not first class either. It's pretty impressive. There's nothing that'll do what they do. So I love the airplanes. I want to do everything I can to break up the idea that it's an unsafe airplane. It is unsafe for some people. It's not inherently unsafe. The airplane is well designed, and it's just built for one purpose, which is to haul ass. And we just have to make sure everybody's trained appropriately and has the appropriate training and experience to be flying this airplane. And I think we can start to mediate the accident and the accident rates on these airplanes. So I'll show you a few things that are unique about this particular Lancair. First thing, obviously, is the Garret engine. The 331-6 only exists on 2 Lancair 4Ps in the world. And that's the most fuel efficient, most power, 840 horsepower that I know of on the Lancair 4P. Most of them are Walter, which are 650 to 750 horsepower. This one also has belly fuel. So this aircraft has 170 gallons of fuel, which is very unique for the Lancair 4P. It's got the big composite 84-inch propeller. I'll walk you into the avionics. All right, here's the cockpit and the avionics fired up. The greatest improvement we made on this particular aircraft was the Garmin upgrade with the G3X here, and that's running my GFC 500. Unfortunately, the G900X will not run the GFC 500. So for now, we chose to run it off the G3X. Has the keypad option on the G900X, which is really nice. It has Avionics TCAS on the MFD. The autopilot's pretty slick. It's got auto level. It has a really impressive yaw damp. So the turbine aircraft really need the yaw damp capability. So it's a really good yaw damp that I think works really well on this aircraft. This airplane uses the VP200 for all the circuit breakers and annunciators, so you can see generator off, gear, trim settings, flap settings, all that kind of stuff. So pretty well equipped. Nice cockpit. Don't mind flying it one bit. So once you decide you want a 4P, that's just the beginning. The next thing you have to figure out is which one. There's so many variables. You want to try to find one that was owner assist, built at the Lancair factory if possible, or at least from a known builder. You have to decide what power plant you want. So the piston ones are going to be twin turbo 550s, and then you've got the turbine versions are primarily Walter 601s. As I mentioned before, there's only 4 Garret powered Lancairs in the world, and 2 of them are 331-1, I think, and 2 of them are 331-6. So this is a -6, which is 840 horsepower. The Walters are good, reliable aircraft with decent support still, and they're affordable engines if you need to replace it. The Garret is also a tank of an engine. It's a geared engine. It's very, very fuel efficient. The Garret is the most fuel efficient turboprop on the planet. So you're probably familiar with the -10s on the Conquest 2s or on the MU2s. So that's just a little bit higher horsepower version of the 331-6 that you see in front of you here. Once you decide what power plant you want, then you have to find the appropriate build quality, and then you have to decide avionics. That's the hard one. A lot of these airplanes still have the old avionics, which will be a true track with the G900, and that just doesn't cut it. You're going to want to find one with a G3X and a Garmin autopilot. The next thing is going to be fuel. What are they doing for fuel? There's a lot of different fuel systems on these airplanes, and a lot of them are complex and require pumps and transfers and things like that. I do not recommend that. This airplane's kind of neat because I have the belly tank, I have the auxiliary, so I'm up to 170 gallons. But the beauty of this system, and this was Moritz again, he created this fuel system, is there is nothing to do besides switch left and right. The auxiliary fuel is burned first, and all I have to do to access the auxiliary fuel is leave it on the left tank. And because it shares the vent with the auxiliary and the left tank, it will drain the auxiliary first. So when you take off in this airplane and you have the belly and the auxiliaries full, all you have to do is leave it on the left side until those are exhausted, and then you go left and right like you would with any other normal low wing. There's no pumping, there's no transfer. It's just a beautiful system. I love operating it. So that's a neat way to do it. And that's, these are experimental aircraft, so you can always modify yours to whatever you want it to be, but that's a neat system. And it's very common for these to have a tank in the baggage, but it's not usually much. They come with only 110 gallons before the auxiliary, so that's not really enough. If you have a turbine powered Lancair with 110, 120, 130 gallons, you're not going very far, especially with a Walter. But with 170 gallons and a Garret, I have flown this aircraft 3.5 hours and had comfortable reserves multiple times. So I can go nonstop to Vegas, nonstop back, which is unheard of for a turbine powered Lancair. So a lot to learn and a lot of different options, and you just have to understand that everyone's a little bit different and make your decision based on, there's so few available that you don't really get, there's only 2 or 3 for sale at any given time. So it's always a trick finding the right airplane. And I feel like I got lucky with this one because it was a no expense spared build, and it did take some sorting whenever I bought it, but now that I've had it for almost 2 years, I've got all the bugs worked out, and I really enjoy flying this airplane.